remember this moment. It's the first nail in your career.
The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under fluorescent lights as I watched my wife of 15 years humiliate me in front of 12 corporate executives. Vanessa Eastman, CEO of Eastman Industries, sat at the head of the table like a queen holding court, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, her red lips curved in what others might mistake for a smile, but I recognized as pure contempt. "Russell," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, "perhaps you could explain to the board why our Q3 operations report is 3 days late?" He felt every eye in the room turn toward me. The operations report she was referring to had been sitting in her inbox for a week. I'd copied her assistant Dina on the email, marked it urgent, even called her office twice. But Vanessa had been too busy with her strategic planning sessions with Evan Cross to bother reading it. "The report was submitted on schedule," I replied evenly, keeping my voice professional despite the heat rising in my chest. "I can forward you the confirmation email if you'd like." Vanessa's green eyes flashed with annoyance. She reached for her Mont Blanc pen and, with deliberate slowness, dropped it on the floor beside my chair. "Pick it up, Russell." The boardroom fell silent. 12 faces stared at me, some confused, others clearly uncomfortable. Evan Cross, sitting 2 seats to Vanessa's right, smirked like he was watching his favorite movie. The bastard was enjoying every second of this. My military training kicked in. Never show weakness. Never give them the satisfaction. I bent down, picked up the pen, and placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Anything else, dear?" I asked, the endearment dripping with sarcasm that only she would catch. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Marissa Trent, Vanessa's head of PR, cleared her throat and suggested they move on to the next agenda item. Devin Liu, the COO, stared at his laptop screen like it contained the secrets of the universe. The meeting dragged on for another hour. I sat there taking notes, responding when spoken to, playing the role of the dutiful operations director, while my wife and her lover exchanged meaningful glances across the table. When it finally ended, I gathered my papers and headed for the door. "Russell," Vanessa called out. "A word?" I stopped but didn't turn around. "I'll be in my office." Relinquish. "Actually, I think it's best if you work from home for the rest of the week. I'll have Dina send you the files you need." Now I did turn around. The boardroom had emptied except for Vanessa and Evan, who was making no effort to hide his amusement. "Work from home," I repeated slowly. "On what exactly? Since you seem to think I'm not doing my job." Relinquished, Nessa stood and smoothed her pencil skirt. "I think some distance would be good for both of us, professionally speaking." Evan finally spoke up, his voice smooth as silk. "Maybe Russell needs some time to reassess his priorities." Crimson. I looked at him for a long moment. Evan Cross was everything I wasn't. Tall where I was average height, smooth where I was rough around the edges. Born into money where I'd earned every dollar through grit and sweat in the Army Corps of Engineers. He wore his privilege like a perfectly tailored suit. "My priorities are crystal clear," I said. "The question is whether everyone else's are." I left them there and walked through the corporate campus to the parking garage. The late afternoon sun reflected off the glass buildings, and I could see the lake in the distance where Vanessa and I used to take weekend boat trips, back when she still pretended to love me. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. A text from my old Army buddy Mick. "Beer tonight? You sound like you need it." I hadn't realized I'd sounded like anything in my brief text asking if he was free, but Mick always could read between the lines. I typed back, "Absolutely. Murphy's at 7. Drive home took me through the tree-lined streets of our upscale neighborhood. Every house was a monument to success. Doctor's money, lawyer's money, corporate money. Our house sat on 2 acres with a view of the lake, complete with a boathouse and a 3-car garage that Vanessa had insisted we needed for entertaining. I pulled into the driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, staring at the house we'd built together. The smart home system Vanessa had insisted on installing last year would have already registered my arrival, adjusting the temperature and lighting to my preferences. It would also log the time I'd arrived, something that had become important as our marriage deteriorated and every movement became evidence in an unspoken case. Inside, I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my home office. The room was my sanctuary. Military commendations on the walls, engineering books on the shelves, a desk I'd built myself from reclaimed oak. It was the one space in the house that felt like mine. I opened my laptop and pulled up the operations report Vanessa had claimed was late. The timestamp clearly showed I'd submitted it 6 days ago. I scrolled through my sent emails, documenting every communication, every deadline met, every project completed ahead of schedule. 15 years of marriage to Vanessa had taught me to keep meticulous records. My phone rang at exactly 6:30. Vanessa's ringtone, Beethoven's funeral march. I'd changed it as a joke years ago, and now it seemed prophetic. Russell, we need to talk. Listening. Not over the phone. Can you come to the office? I thought you wanted me to work from home this week. Was a pause. This is personal. Freedom's almost laughed. Everything with Vanessa was personal, even when she pretended it was business. I'll be at Murphy's with Mick. If you want to talk, you know where to find me. Russell, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not making anything hard. You dropped a pen and told me to pick it up in front of the board. You sent me home like a child being dismissed from school. Now you want to talk. So talk. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices in the background. Evan's voice, specifically. I've made a decision, she said finally. About us. About the company. About everything. What kind of decision? I think it's best if we separate. Professionally and personally. I set down my bourbon glass carefully. You're firing me. I'm offering you a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, full benefits, and you keep your stock options. And personally, I've chosen to sever all contact. I want you to stay away from me, from the company, from my life. Forever. The line went quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. 15 years of marriage, reduced to a phone call that lasted less than 3 minutes. You'll regret this, I said quietly. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Hung up and finished my bourbon. Then I grabbed my keys and headed for Murphy's Tavern, where Mick was waiting with a beer and the kind of loyalty that money couldn't buy. The bar was exactly what you'd expect from a place called Murphy's. Dark wood, dim lighting, and the smell of cigarettes that had soaked into the walls before smoking bans existed. Mick sat in our usual booth, 2 beers already on the table. You look like heck, he said by way of greeting. Feel worse. I slid into the booth and took a long pull of beer. Vanessa fired me today and divorced me. Same phone call. Mick whistled low. Efficient. Cold as a witch's tit, but efficient. She's been planning this for months, maybe years. I told him about the boardroom humiliation, the pen, Evan's smirk. She wanted to break me down first, make sure everyone saw me as weak before she pulled the trigger. What are you going to do? Rested at my beer, watching the condensation drip down the glass. I'm going to make her regret every second of the last 15 years. Mick leaned forward. Russ, I know you're pissed, but don't do anything stupid. Don't give her ammunition for a restraining order or worse. Who said anything about stupid? I met his eyes. I spent 12 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. I know how to plan an operation. I know how to gather intelligence. And I know how to execute a mission. What kind of mission? Smiled for the first time all day. The kind where the target never sees it coming. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for what I suspected might be the last time. Vanessa hadn't come home, which wasn't unusual lately. Her late strategy meetings with Evan had become a regular occurrence. What was unusual was the email waiting in my inbox from Dina, Vanessa's assistant. Mr. Eastman, I've been instructed to coordinate the transfer of your personal items from your office. I can arrange for pickup this afternoon if that works for you. Also, there are some files you might want to review before your departure. Personal files. I've uploaded them to the shared drive under archive/personal/VE2024. Password is your anniversary date. Dina. I stare at the email for a full minute. Dina had worked for Vanessa for 3 years, and in all that time, she'd never sent me anything that could be considered insubordination. The fact that she was doing it now meant one of two things. Either she was setting me up, or she was as fed up with Vanessa as I was. I typed in our anniversary date, June 15th, 2009, and accessed the folder. What I found there made my skin run cold and hot at the same time. Email threads between Vanessa and Evan dating back 8 months. Photos from their weekend trips to Chicago and New York that I'd been told were board retreats. Text message screenshots that left nothing to the imagination. But the real treasure was a series of emails between Vanessa and Marissa Trent discussing the Russell problem and how to manage his exit strategy. An email from Marissa particularly caught my attention. We need to document everything. Missed meetings, late reports, any signs of instability. Build the case slowly so the board sees the termination as inevitable rather than personal. Another from Vanessa. Russell's military background could be a problem if he doesn't go quietly. Evan thinks we should consider a restraining order as a preemptive measure. Imprisoned scrimmage, then copied the files to a secure drive. Dina had given me a gift, and I wasn't going to waste it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Delete this message. D. Checked my personal email and found a new message from a Gmail account I didn't recognize. The subject line was, Additional Materials. Inside were video files. Security camera footage from the executive conference room, time-stamped from various dates over the past 6 months. I opened the first one and watched Vanessa and Evan in what was clearly an intimate moment after what should have been a board meeting. The second video showed Evan berating a junior employee, calling her worthless and a waste of company resources, while Vanessa watched and laughed. The third video was from last week's board meeting. I watched myself pick up that pen, but the camera angle showed something I hadn't seen from my position at the table. Marissa filming the whole thing with her phone. I forwarded everything to my personal cloud storage, then called Mick. I need your help with something, I said when he answered. What kind of help? Rejection. The legal kind. Your security company still does corporate investigations? Depends on what you're investigating. Pupils fraud, hostile work environment, inappropriate conduct. The kind of stuff that makes board members nervous and shareholders jumpy. Was a pause. How solid is your evidence? Solid enough to bury them all. I'll be over in an hour. Relinquish me. While I waited for Mick, I started planning. The military had taught me that successful operations required clear objectives, detailed intelligence, and flawless execution. My objective was simple. Destroy Vanessa's career and reputation the same way she'd tried to destroy mine. The intelligence was falling into my lap thanks to Dina and Vanessa's own arrogance. The execution would require patience and precision. I made a list of everyone who had wronged me or enabled Vanessa's behavior. Vanessa herself, obviously. Evan Cross, Marissa Trent, Devin Liu, who'd sat silent while Vanessa humiliated me. The board members who'd watched and done nothing. Then I made a second list of potential allies. Dina, clearly. Mick, always. My daughter Lila, home from college for the summer, who'd never liked Evan and had started asking pointed questions about why her parents never seemed to be in the same room anymore. Mick arrived with a laptop bag and a grim expression. Show me what you've got. I walked him through everything. The emails, the videos, the documentation of Vanessa's affair, and the systematic campaign to force me out of the company. Mick took notes and asked the right questions. This is good, he said finally. Really good. But if you want to destroy her completely, we need more. What kind of more? Financial irregularities. Misuse of company funds. Something that will get the SEC interested. I thought about that. Vanessa's been taking a lot of trips lately. Always first class, always 5-star hotels. And Evan's consulting fees have been increasing every quarter, despite the company's declining profits. Can you prove the trips were personal rather than business? I smiled. I can prove they were sharing hotel rooms. Mick grinned back. Now we're talking. We spent the next 2 hours going through Vanessa's expense reports and cross-referencing them with her calendar and the photos Dina had provided. The pattern was clear. Every business trip coincided with romantic getaways with Evan, all charged to the company credit card. This is enough to trigger an internal audit, Mick said. Maybe even a criminal investigation. I don't want her in prison, I said. I want her destroyed, professionally and personally, but I want her to live with it. Prison would be too easy. Roofing Mick studied my face. You've really thought this through. I've had time to think. My phone rang. Lila's number. Dad, what's going on? Mom called and said you won't be living at the house anymore. I closed my eyes. I'd been dreading this conversation. Your mother and I are getting divorced, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine, just processing everything. Is it because of Evan? Because I always thought he was a creep. Willingnessimized out of the mouths of babes. It's complicated, Lila. No, it's not. She's been cheating on you, hasn't she? I looked at Mick, who was pretending not to listen. We'll talk when you get home, okay? I'm driving up tonight. And Dad, whatever you're planning, I'm on your team. After I hung up, Mick shook his head. Smart kid. Gets it from her mother, unfortunately. Cites. So what's the plan? I pulled up a calendar on my laptop. Vanessa's hosting the annual charity gala next Friday. 500 guests, including every board member, major shareholders, and half the city council. Local press will be there. And that's where we're going to end her career. Mick leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. I spent the next hour outlining my plan. It was ambitious, risky, and completely legal. Most importantly, it would be public and humiliating, just like she'd tried to make my downfall. You're sure about this? Mick asked when I finished. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Then let's burn it all down. Jersey Eastman Industries' annual charity gala was always held at the Lakeside Country Club, a sprawling venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. Vanessa had been planning this year's event for months, calling it her vision for the company's future. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent the week leading up to the gala putting pieces in place. Mick's security company had contracts with half the venues in town, including the country club, which gave us legitimate access to the building's systems. Dina continued to feed me information, including Vanessa's schedule and the guest list for the gala. The guest list was particularly interesting. In addition to the usual board members and shareholders, Vanessa had invited several potential investors and at least 3 journalists from the business section of the local newspaper. She was clearly planning to use the event to announce something big. On Wednesday, I got my answer. Dina forwarded me a draft press release announcing Vanessa's plan to take the company public within the next 18 months. The release painted her as a visionary leader who had streamlined operations and eliminated inefficiencies to position the company for explosive growth. I was apparently one of the inefficiencies she'd eliminated. That same day, I received a call from Jenkins Hartley & Associates, the law firm handling my divorce. Vanessa was demanding the house, half my retirement savings, and spousal support. She was also requesting a restraining order, claiming I'd been behaving erratically and making threatening statements. What kind of threatening statements? I asked my lawyer. According to her filing, you told her she would regret leaving you. She's characterizing that as a threat of violence. It wasn't a threat of violence. It was a statement of fact. Mr. Eastman, I need you to be very careful about any contact with your wife until after the hearing next week. Don't give her any ammunition. I assured him I had no lawyer. I just told them everything that reacts to it. I assured him I had no intention of contacting Vanessa directly. I had other plans. Friday morning dawned clear and warm. Perfect weather for an outdoor cocktail reception before the main event. I spent the morning at Mick's office, making final preparations. We'd assembled everything into a comprehensive presentation. Emails, photos, financial records, video footage, and a detailed timeline of Vanessa's affair and the conspiracy to force me out of the company. You sure you want to do this publicly? Mick asked one last time. We could take this to the board privately. Let them handle it internally. She humiliated me publicly. She gets the same treatment. Fair enough. What about Lila? My daughter had driven up from college as promised and was staying at Mick's house to avoid the drama at home. She'd offered to help, but I'd drawn the line at involving her directly. She knows what's happening. She's okay with it. Actually, Lila had been more than okay with it. When I'd shown her the evidence of her mother's affair and the campaign against me, she had gotten angrier than I'd ever seen her. "She's been lying to both of us," Lila had said, "making you look crazy while she's been screwing around with that a-hole. Destroy her, Dad. She deserves it." Alex, o'clock. I put on my best suit and drove to the country club. The parking lot was already full of luxury cars. BMWs, Mercedes, Teslas, and at least 2 Maseratis. Vanessa's crowd had arrived in force. I walked through the main entrance like I belonged there, which I did. I'd been to this event every year for the past decade, back when Vanessa and I were still pretending to be happily married. The staff knew me, the other guests knew me, and most importantly, I was still technically a shareholder and company officer until the divorce was finalized. The cocktail reception was in full swing on the outdoor terrace. I grabbed a bourbon from the bar and circulated through the crowd, making small talk and acting like everything was normal. Several people asked about my absence from the office, and I gave vague answers about taking some time to focus on strategic planning. Vanessa was holding court near the fountain, wearing a stunning red dress that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Evan stood beside her like a faithful dog, occasionally whispering in her ear or laughing at something she said. They looked perfect together, beautiful, successful, completely untouchable. That was about to change. At 7:30, the guests moved inside for dinner and the main program. I'd specifically requested a table in the back, claiming I preferred to observe rather than be observed. The real reason was that I needed a clear view of the projection screen and quick access to the AV booth. Vanessa took the stage after the main course, looking radiant under the spotlights. She launched into her prepared remarks about the company's bright future and her vision for growth. The audience was eating it up, nodding, applauding, hanging on every word. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said as her speech reached its climax, "I'm excited to announce that Eastman Industries will be filing for our initial public offering within the next 18 months. This company, built on innovation and integrity, is ready to take its place among the publicly traded success stories of American business." Relink was thunderous. I waited for it to die down, then stood up. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough to be heard throughout the room. "I have a question about that integrity you mentioned." Room fell silent. Vanessa's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "Russell," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "this isn't the appropriate forum for company business. Actually, I think it's the perfect forum." I walked toward the stage, pulling out my phone as I moved. "Especially since you've invited investors and journalists to hear about the company's bright future." Seizing murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see board members shifting uncomfortably in their seats, and Marissa Trent was frantically typing on her phone, probably trying to figure out how to contain whatever was about to happen. "Ladies and gentlemen," I continued, reaching the front of the room, "before you invest in Eastman Industries, I think you should know what kind of leadership you'd be backing." I nodded to Mick, who was stationed near the AV booth. The lights dimmed, and the projection screen came to life. The first image was an email from Vanessa to Evan, discussing their weekend plans in explicit detail. The second was a photo of them kissing on a hotel balcony in Chicago. The third was a company expense report showing that Vanessa had charged the romantic getaway to the corporate account. The room erupted in shocked whispers and gasps. Vanessa stood frozen on the stage, her face cycling through emotions. Surprise, anger, panic, and finally, cold rage. "This is a private matter," she said into the microphone, but her voice was shaking. "Is corporate fraud a private matter?" I asked. "Because that's what this is. Misuse of company funds for personal expenses. And that's just the beginning." The next slides showed the email thread between Vanessa and Marissa planning my termination, including discussions of how to build a case against me and make it look justified. Then came the video footage of Evan berating the junior employee while Vanessa watched and laughed. "This is the leadership team that wants to take your company public," I said to the stunned audience. "A CEO who uses company money to fund her affair, and a strategic advisor who mistreats employees for entertainment." Vanessa finally found her voice. "Security! Remove this man immediately!" But the country club security guards weren't moving. They were staring at the screen like everyone else, watching the evidence of systematic corruption and misconduct unfold in high definition. Devin Liu, the COO, stood up from his table. "Is this documentation authentic?" "Terminated. Every email, every photo, every expense report," I confirmed. "All obtained through legal means and verified by independent sources." Corrections. Shimmered at Vanessa. "You wanted to eliminate inefficiencies from the company. Congratulations. You just eliminated yourself." Missionary. The room exploded into chaos. Board members were shouting questions. Journalists were taking notes furiously, and potential investors were heading for the exits. Evan had disappeared entirely. I spotted him slipping out a side door like the coward he was. Vanessa stepped down from the stage and walked toward me, her face a mask of fury. "You bastard," she hissed. "You'll pay for this." "I already paid," I replied calmly. 15 years of marriage to you is payment enough." She raised her hand as if to slap me, but stopped when she realized half the room was watching and at least 2 people were recording with their phones. "Ladies and gentlemen," came a voice from the back of the room. I turned to see Harold Morrison, the chairman of the board, standing with his cell phone in his hand. "The board will be convening an emergency meeting tomorrow morning to address these allegations. In the meantime, I'm suspending Mrs. Eastman from all corporate duties pending a full investigation." Vanessa's face went white. "Harold, you can't." "I can and I am. Security will escort you from the premises." This time, security did move. 2 guards approached Vanessa, not roughly but firmly. She looked around the room desperately, searching for allies, but found only stares of shock, disgust, and disappointment. As they led her toward the exit, she turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." The fallout from the charity gala was swift and brutal. By Saturday morning, the story was front-page news in the business section. Local CEO suspended after fraud allegations surface at company gala. The article included several of the photos I'd presented, as well as quotes from board members expressing their shock and disappointment. My lawyer called a lawyer before noon, demanding a meeting to discuss terms. Apparently, the restraining order request had been quietly withdrawn, and Vanessa was suddenly much more interested in a quick, quiet divorce settlement. I was sitting in Mick's office, reading the news coverage online, when Dina called my personal phone. "Mr. Eastman, I wanted to let you know that I've been asked to clean out Mrs. Eastman's office. I found some additional materials you might find interesting." "What kind of materials?" "Financial records. It looks like the personal expenses go back much further than we thought. And there are some contracts with Mr. Cross's consulting firm that don't look right." I met Dina at the company offices that afternoon. The building felt different now, quieter, more tense. Employees whispered in hallways and avoided eye contact. The scandal had shaken everyone. Dina led me to Vanessa's corner office, which was in the process of being packed up. Boxes lined the walls, and her personal items were stacked on the desk. "I found these in her locked filing cabinet," Dina said, handing me a folder. The lock was broken, so I had maintenance open it. Inside were contracts showing that Evan's consulting fees had increased by 400% over the past year, despite the company's declining revenues. There were also invoices for strategic consulting services that corresponded exactly with Vanessa and Evan's romantic getaways. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. Dina pulled out a calculator. "Based on what I can find here, approximately $300,000 in the past 18 months. All approved personally by Mrs. Eastman, without board oversight. This wasn't just an affair or misuse of company credit cards. This was systematic embezzlement." "Dina, why are you helping me?" She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Mrs. Eastman fired my predecessor for asking questions about expense reports. She made it clear that my job depended on not asking questions. But I have a daughter starting college next year, and I can't afford to work for a company that might not exist because of fraud." "What do you mean, might not exist?" "The board meeting this morning didn't go well. 3 major clients have already called to express concerns about their contracts. 2 potential investors pulled out of preliminary discussions, and the SEC has opened a preliminary inquiry based on the news reports. I have a moment of unexpected guilt. I'd wanted to destroy Vanessa's career, but I hadn't intended to bring down the entire company and put innocent people out of work. What's the board planning to do? Emergency restructuring. They're bringing in an interim CEO and a forensic accounting firm. They might be able to save the company, but it's going to be ugly for a while. I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the additional evidence with Mick. The pattern of fraud was even more extensive than we'd initially discovered. Vanessa hadn't just been using company money for her affair. She'd been systematically looting the company to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford on her salary alone. This changes things, Mick said. This isn't just corporate drama anymore. This is serious criminal behavior. Should we turn it over to the authorities? We should turn it over to the board and let them decide. But Russ, you need to be prepared for the possibility that Vanessa might go to prison. That evening, I drove to the lake house where Vanessa and I had spent our early married years. She'd moved there temporarily after being escorted from our main house by sheriff's deputies, serving an eviction notice. The divorce proceedings had accelerated rapidly once the fraud allegations became public. I found her sitting on the dock, staring out at the water. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident CEO who had dominated boardrooms and charity galas was gone, replaced by a woman who looked lost and defeated. "Come to gloat?" she asked without turning around. "Come to talk. About what? You've already destroyed everything." I sat down beside her on the dock. "I destroyed your lies, your fraud, your conspiracy against me. I didn't destroy you. You did that yourself." Stemmed at me. Her eyes were red from crying, and her perfect makeup was smudged. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The company might not survive this. Hundreds of people could lose their jobs. That's on you, not me. I didn't steal $300,000. I didn't create fake consulting contracts. I didn't use company money to fund an affair. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? You were going to frame me as an unstable employee, force me out, then take the company public and get rich while I disappeared into obscurity?" Which was answer enough. "The board met with me today," she said finally. "They're offering me a choice. Resign quietly and make full restitution, or face criminal charges. What are you going to do?" "What choice do I have? My lawyer says if I fight it, I could face 5 to 10 years in federal prison." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the lake. Despite everything, there was a part of me that remembered loving this woman, building a life with her, dreaming about growing old together. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for all of it. The affair, the lies, the way I treated you. You deserved better." "Yes, I did. Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about that question for a long time. Maybe someday, but not today. I stood up to leave, then turned back. "Vanessa, there's something you should know. The board is meeting Monday morning to vote on interim leadership for the company." "So?" "They've asked me to consider returning as interim CEO while they search for a permanent replacement." Her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, and, finally, something that might have been respect. "You planned this whole thing, didn't you? Not just exposing me, but positioning yourself to take over. I planned to survive your betrayal and make sure you faced consequences for your actions. Everything else is just a bonus." I walked back to my truck, leaving her alone on the dock where we'd once planned our future together. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Saw the news. Proud of you, Dad. Justice served." From Mick. "Board meeting went well. Looks like you're going to be busy Monday morning, Mr. CEO." I smiled and kept driving toward whatever came next. Monday morning, I walked into the Eastman Industries headquarters as the interim CEO. The building felt different. Cleaner, somehow. Like a weight had been lifted from its glass and steel frame. Dina met me at the elevator with a stack of files and a tentative smile. "Good morning, Mr. Eastman. The senior staff is waiting in the main conference room for your 9 o'clock meeting. How are people handling the transition? Better than expected. Morale has actually improved since Friday. I think everyone knew something was wrong, but nobody wanted to be the one to speak up. The conference room was full when I arrived. Devin Liu, Marissa Trent, the department heads, and several people I didn't immediately recognize. I took the seat at the head of the table, Vanessa's old seat, and looked around the room. Before we begin, I said, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm the husband of the woman who was just forced to resign in disgrace. Yes, this is awkward for everyone. But I'm also the person who exposed the fraud that was bleeding this company dry, and I'm the one the board has asked to help fix it. Devin Liu cleared his throat. What's the plan for moving forward? First, we cooperate fully with the forensic audit. We turn over every document, every email, every receipt. We let the accountants and investigators do their jobs without interference. Second, we rebuild trust with our clients and investors by being completely transparent about what happened and what we're doing to prevent it from happening again. Look directly at Marissa. That means no spin, no PR campaigns to minimize the damage, no attempts to control the narrative. We tell the truth and let our actions speak for themselves. Shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mr. Eastman, with respect, complete transparency could be damaging to the company's reputation and stock value. Our reputation is already damaged. Our stock value is already in the toilet. We can either rebuild from a foundation of honesty, or we can continue the pattern of lies and cover-ups that got us here in the first place. One of the people I didn't recognize spoke up. Mr. Eastman, I'm Jennifer Walsh from the forensic accounting firm. We've completed our preliminary review, and I have some findings to share. Go ahead. The total amount of fraudulent expenses and inflated consulting fees appears to be approximately $450,000 over the past 2 years. However, we've also identified several cost-saving opportunities and operational efficiencies that could offset much of that loss within the next fiscal year. What efficiencies? Redundant positions, overstaffed departments, unnecessary expenses that were approved without proper oversight. It appears that Mrs. Eastman was either unaware of these inefficiencies or chose to ignore them. Anguish smiled. Vanessa had been so focused on her affair and her schemes that she'd neglected the basic responsibilities of running a company. Her incompetence might actually make it easier to recover from her fraud. What about client retention? Devin answered that one. We've lost 2 smaller clients, but our major accounts are staying. Most of them are more concerned about stability going forward than they are about past problems. The meeting continued for 2 hours, covering everything from legal strategies to operational reforms to communication plans. By the end, I had a clear picture of the company's situation. Damaged, but not destroyed. Weakened, but not broken. After the meeting, I asked Marissa to stay behind. I want to be clear about something, I said when the room had emptied. I know you were part of the conspiracy to force me out. I have the emails proving it. Her face went pale. Mr. Eastman, I was just following orders. I don't care about excuses. What I care about is whether you can do your job with integrity going forward. Can you represent this company honestly, or do I need to find someone who can? She was quiet for a long moment. I can do my job. I want to do my job. I made mistakes, but I'd like the chance to make up for them. Good. Your first assignment is to draft a press release announcing the company's new transparency policies and our cooperation with all ongoing investigations. No spin, no euphemisms, no attempts to minimize what happened. Just the facts. Yes, sir. I met with the board to discuss long-term strategy. Harold Morrison, the chairman, got straight to the point. Russell, we need to talk about your permanent status with the company. The interim CEO position was always meant to be temporary while we conducted a search. Allegedly. I understand. However, given your performance over the past few days and the positive response from employees and clients, we'd like to offer you the position permanently. I'd been expecting this conversation, but I still needed a moment to process it. 3 weeks ago, Vanessa had humiliated me in this same boardroom and forced me out of the company. Now, they were offering me her job. What about the divorce proceedings? The potential conflicts of interest? Relinquished. As long as the divorce is finalized and you divest any personal financial interest in the outcome of the fraud investigation, there shouldn't be any legal issues. And the board is comfortable with the optics of hiring the ex-husband of the woman who defrauded the company? Mailbox smiled. Russell, you're the one who exposed the fraud. You're the one who saved the company from potentially catastrophic losses. The optics work in our favor. I thought about Vanessa, probably sitting in her lawyer's office at that very moment, negotiating the terms of her disgrace. I thought about Evan Cross, who had disappeared so completely after the gala that rumors were circulating about him fleeing the state. I thought about the pen she'd dropped, the humiliation she'd intended, the systematic campaign to destroy my career and reputation. I accept, I said. The news of my permanent appointment broke the next morning. The headline in the business section read, "Whistleblower named CEO of company he helped save." The article painted me as a corporate hero who had sacrificed his marriage to expose corruption and protect innocent employees. It wasn't entirely accurate, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Vanessa's resignation became official that same day. According to the press release, she was pursuing other opportunities and wished the company continued success. She would be making full restitution for the fraudulent expenses and would have no further involvement with Eastman Industries. Evan Cross was facing a separate civil lawsuit for the inflated consulting fees. His business had collapsed overnight when word spread about his involvement in the fraud. Last I heard, he was working at a car dealership in another state, selling used Hondas to people who had never heard of him. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. Vanessa got the lake house and a modest settlement. I kept the main house, my retirement savings, and my dignity. More importantly, I kept my daughter's respect and my own self-respect. On my first official day as CEO, I found a note on my desk from Dina. "Congratulations, Mr. Eastman. The company is in good hands." If I thought about that as I sat in my new corner office, looking out at the lake where Vanessa and I had once planned our future. The view was the same, but everything else had changed. The company was stronger, my conscience was clear, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. "Saw the announcement. CEO Dad, I'm so proud of you." Another text from Mick. "Drinks tonight to celebrate. First round's on the new CEO." I smiled and started planning my first board presentation as the permanent CEO of Eastman Industries. Vanessa had tried to destroy me, but instead, she had given me the opportunity to rebuild everything: the company, my reputation, and my life. Sometimes the best revenge is simply outlasting your enemies and thriving in spite of them. I had warned her she would regret her choices. I had kept my promise. The pen she had dropped in that boardroom had been the first step in her downfall and the first step in my resurrection. Justice had been served, the company had been saved, and I was finally free to build the future I deserved.